Hello everyone, welcome to another live. My apologies for being late again. I'm going to be on time one of these days. If you can hear me okay, let me know with a thumbs up in the comments, or if there are any technical difficulties that I am unaware of, you can let me know down below. And let's go through our agenda today. Happy Saturday, everyone. If you don't know, we have moved our lives to Saturday. My summer schedule changed a bit, so I appreciate the adjustment. Ooh, today's going to be fun. You know what we're talking about today? Drop final inches in your splits. And we'll go over both middle and front, where we get asked a lot. For those who are working on splits, you don't have to work on splits, but you could also can, right? Do what you like. We get asked a lot where the pelvis is low, but just those few inches to clear the floor and to touch down is what we're talking about today. Also, if you like a free class from us, just DM, direct message, not comment here in the live. After you watch the live, head over to our main page, direct message us the word live, L-I-V-E, and you'll receive a free class. And our middle split challenge starts on Monday on the app. Okie dokie. So let's wait until some people are in the room. I'm going to have some water. Few inches in the split. I would say a personal story. It took me longer to acquire my middle split, but that doesn't mean that if you have a hard time as well with middle splits that you can't achieve a flat middle split. And the dialogue around when my hips are just not built like that. Sure, your hips might not be built for getting middle splits right away, but to not be able to do them completely, I don't think there's much truth to that. I think people feel that way because when trying to attempt a middle split for the first time, yes, it can be painful, it can be uncomfortable, and those sensations leave you to feel like it's impossible. But sure, you're trying something new for the first time. Typically, when we encounter pain, we don't feel encouraged to do it again. And when it comes to our hip joints, they're all built differently, and we might all need a different approach to achieve the same goal, and that's fine. So I just want to put that out there. Same thing with same thing with front splits. Depending on the person, some might have an easier time with the front split, some might have an easier time with the middle splits. And again, today we're talking about how you can clear those last inches. And before we get into the demos and what my suggestions are, a few things to cover, right? Before you cover those inches, are you in fact in a good position? What do I mean by that? So we're not looking to clear the inches as an example for our front split in this position. We want to clear the inches in this position, right? We want to be able to clear, to get our pelvis lower while it's square. We don't want to rotate so much that we're trying to get last inches in a position that's not going to set us up for success. And I'm not saying that you can't open your pelvis, because one could argue when you're upside down, be it in a handstand or in an aerial, your hips open a little bit to make your split appear flatter, for sure. But when trying to target the right muscles in achieving a skill without or lessening the risk of injury, there are certain techniques in place on purpose so that you can teach your pelvis to be square. And once you do that, you could do whatever you want. You have to have the foundation first before you go wild. Because if you go wild without the foundation, then you have no pillars to follow. You don't have anything to go off of. So that's why it's important to establish the correct position first. And once you know that, you then can go into opening because you know what an open split is versus a more square split. Because you have those, what word do I want to use? Not credentials, but you have those that foundation in place. I'll just say that. If the word comes up in my head, I'll make sure I mention that. Now for middle splits, not necessarily the straddle. The straddle position, your knees are still pointing up. We're talking about this middle split position, right? And we don't want to clear the inches where our torso's way forward. We want to clear the inches where our pelvis is directly in line with our hips, or our hip joints, rather. Where if you were to go profile, legs, hips are on the same plane, not hips forward and the legs back. Okay, that's what we're trying to, again, we're making that distinction. So, what is my favorite way? I'm not going to say the best way because there's no best for everyone since everyone's different. My personal favorite way to clear inches for the front split from both a hamstring and a hip flexor perspective, specifically for the back hip perspective, is not only to target hip flexors, right? Because we target the hip flexor in a 90-90 position, in a low lunge position. I think it's time for us to start incorporating a more advanced position with the heel to butt variations. And the reason I say that is because heel to butt incorporates a lot of soas that plays a huge role in getting those hips down. Because you can feel the difference. You can feel the difference when you just do a regular old low lunge. But when you pull that hip to butt, it's like a whole different scenario we're dealing with. And I know for myself, when my front splits are high, when I get to the heel to butt stuff, things start cracking. The pelvis gets lower. Right? So, let's now focus on heel to butt variations that will help you get lower in your splits. And I would suggest that you either have a knee pad, invite another pillow or towel, roll up your mat, 2 mats, 3 mats, whatever you need. The first variation that's a little easier to practice is the open hip variation. So instead of your foot being directly in front of you, you heel toe it out, so that your torso drops inside the leg. You reach back with the opposite foot. This is a little easier to access than same side hand to foot. And some things to monitor. When pulling heel to butt, you want to make sure that you are maintaining your hip extension. We don't want to pike the hip while pulling the foot in. One, that's going to cause some gnarly hamstring cramps. And also, you're not properly recruiting your psoas and quadriceps in a way that translates into a lower hip in a front split. If you find that when reaching back to your your back foot is painful or is tight, where you cannot maintain this extended position, then maybe you start incorporating active heel to butt until you can then grab. Okay? Version number 2 is the tougher one, is same hand to foot side. I like using a block on the inside of the front leg. You drop, you turn without opening your front hip. You try to keep that hip closed. You also try to keep your back hip from opening as well because, again, we want to place that emphasis on the psoas. You then start to pull same side heel to butt from the inside. Number 3, and this one's a doozy, okay? So if you haven't tried this one before, please be careful. You could try it with me. I would suggest you warm up first with the less intense variations that I showed. This is same side hand to foot, but I would now place block on the outside. If you do get hamstring cramps, keep your hip down and also have some electrolytes, because dehydration could also cause cramping, but I wouldn't be able to pinpoint the real reason. Prop your block high, same side hand to foot, rotate your hands. So now hands are inside. While dropping hip, you lift the chest. This is a gnarly stretch and is a more advanced version of the beloved, the much hated couch stretch. Now, my bed right now is a total mess, so I will demonstrate this on my dresser. I wouldn't recommend that you do the same, but for the sake of example, this is the one I show many a time, where you do heel to butt. This is basically a less intense version of the one I just showed, where you crank heel to butt while you keep your hip down. Again, one of my most favorite ways to help that pelvis get lower. Heel to butt variations are goated, in my opinion, for getting that pelvis down without compromising your pelvis's position. Already, okay? And I didn't even stretch my hamstrings. My hamstrings are tight. I did Romanian deadlifts yesterday, and the hams are sore, family. Okay, so I gotta stretch them later. But I didn't stretch hamstrings. I just focused on my soas, and I already touched down. You remember how when I was demoing, I was here? Okay, I'm here now. This is where I feel, or what I feel makes a major difference. It makes a major difference to my body. So again, I'm only speaking from the perspective of what I have felt, but just working with the people that I have and knowing on average, the back hip extension is a challenge for most. When you start to focus on heel to butt variations in your lunges, that's where you will see the inches start to drop. And the space between pelvis and floor will start to close. All without having to overemphasize hamstrings. Now, that doesn't mean you can't improve your hamstring flexibility. I will most certainly suggest that you do. I apologize, I'm unable to answer any questions about joints. So that is a question for a medical professional. So if we could keep the questions to what the topic is, that would be great. Now for middle splits are tougher. But I found that one of my favorite ways to address clearing inches between you and the floor is focusing on frog, as well as also probably focusing on some joint articulations where you truly work on your hip capsule space, maybe identifying what's stuck, because if you take your hip joint out for a ride and you encounter those sticky parts, you then can properly integrate the stretches that address those restrictions, and also the isometric work that can improve those conditions as well. Meaning, if you have a hard time rotating, you might have to work on external rotation and some flexion. You might even consider working on some internal rotation. That could be a restriction with you trying to get closer down to the floor. Now, one of my, again, favorite ways to work on middle splits is to take the legs out of it and just focus on the inner thighs. And that setup looks like this. I personally like to use blocks and work on a deficit. Once you have blocks placed here, knees come on, and, oop, I'm too close to the wall. You could also have something else under your elbows if that makes it more comfortable. And now, because we have a deficit since the blocks are lifting from the floor, you could work on shifting forward and back. You could work on arch and curl. You could do your isometrics where you try to press your knees down as if you're trying to drive them through the floor, and then reverse that isometric as if you're trying to lift your knees off of the blocks and driving your femurs, those are your thigh bones, into your pelvis, and then relax. And you could run that for a few rounds for your pails and rails. And that allows you to not worry about the insides of your knees if they are particularly sensitive when holding the middle split position. So if you're quite far from the floor and the insides of your knees don't have great tolerance for that pressure, you can still work on getting lower by targeting the inner thighs in lifting, or rather practicing your frog stretch on blocks. I personally like the blocks because, especially if they're a foam, a softer foam preferably, you could just stay there longer and you feel more comfortable doing so. And even that, I wasn't there for long and my middle split feels better. But again, this is from practice. This is from experimenting, trial and error, and what I found to be one of the best approaches in clearing for, again, my favorite, let me not use the word best, one of my favorite approaches to clearing the floor. And I'm sure if you start implementing these techniques, that you will see a difference as well. Everyone's different. This is what I think works. You can even use weight, right? So let's say that your frog is pretty good, but your butterfly is still pretty high. You could use weights to help weigh down the thighs. You could even lie down while feet are together and knees are wide for your hip flexor stretches. I showed this before, how you could incorporate resistance in your stretching, where if you set it up, block near the wall. Let me use the other side just so I could even out. You hold on to dumbbells and you use the weight to just help that pelvis drop. And that's a great way to incorporate load while also improving your range of motion. And also now trying to introduce the strength and the intelligence to generate force, right? So when you have load, you go as low as you can and you try to come out of it slowly. You go back down a little lower, you come out of it slowly. There are so many ways that you can incorporate weight in a way that improves your range of motion, but also strengthens that end range, right? So how low can you go? What's the limitation to your depth? And can you get out of that range with control and not get stuck there because you don't have the strength to do so? And that's just one example. You could even do that with the knees on the blocks. It'll be a little tricky with weight. You will have to do it Van Damme style, where you're holding a weight and then you're elevated with both legs on risers or whatever you put your feet on and use the weight to come down. That's an advanced variation. So we're not going to go there just yet, but it is possible. I've seen people do it. What else is there? For hamstrings, to get that last bit, I prefer standing variations and you trying to tilt your hip higher. And what that looks like, and you can use blocks, staggered stance, blocks either side of the front foot, in trying to tilt your hip as much as possible and peel down over your leg, increasing that compression almost as if you're arching against your thigh. That, I feel, advances the hamstring stretch to where it carries over well to the front leg in a front split without compromising your pelvis's position, right? Because ultimately, we don't want to open the hip this way, or actually, we don't want to open the hip this way. We want to be more here. But focusing on one leg at a time in trying to increase the degree of your hip tilt while keeping the knee straight is one of my favorite ways to address the front leg in getting lower, but is about that back hip extension. Again, open hip variation, drop. You could even use a block to be higher, heel to butt. Same, heel to butt. Same, heel to butt with a little bit of a back bend. Couch stretch, or dresser stretch, as I like to call it. And before I say anything else, are there any questions about what I covered? Do we need clarification on any of the stretches that I went over? Also, if there are any other questions about this topic, I'm more than happy to demo. If you're watching the replay, thank you so much for doing so. This is the portion of the live where I stare at the screen without saying anything, in waiting for any questions or comments to slide up. So it might look strange when seeing this replay without the comments running, but that's what's happening in real time at the moment. And remember, if you would like a free class, direct message the account, the word live, L-I-V-E. And did I say, was it middle splits that starts on Monday? Yes, I think that's what it was. Now, these exercises that I demonstrated is not so much because I know I sound like I'm showing you a miracle. Not that it's a miracle, but it's going to help you make strides. So don't expect yourself to touch down after you've tried these, right? Because if you're still pretty high off the floor, it might take several weeks for you to get lower. The good hamstring stretch is what I showed earlier. So any of these will work. The standing version, tilting the hip. Seated version, leaning forward. I think this is the most accessible, especially because you could use a prop in trying to bring your leg closer to the body. Yes, definitely try it with the bricks. Bricks, blocks, same thing, but I think I know what you're saying. I think I know what you're referring to. And with hamstrings, stay. Like 2 minutes each side, but not stagnant staying. You want to increase or change the tilt of your pelvis like every 1/10 of an inch that you can as you stay in that position. And move around in it, especially because even seated, I like playing with taking the torso outside the leg, inside the leg, right over the leg. There's a lot to explore there. And if you're just joining, we covered today clearing those last inches in a split, both front and middle. And if you would like to see everything from the top, from the beginning, we will have this as a replay on our main feed. And if you have any questions about what we covered today, don't be shy. Let us know down in the comments, down in the live comments. Is that it? So I just went over a bunch of examples from the beginning, but I'll be happy to go over them again. Hip flexors. That's the front of your hip. So anything extension is going to stretch your hip flexors. And what we specifically went over today was adding heel to butt variations to increase the range of motion and the stretch for both your hip flexor and your quadriceps to clear the inches between the pelvis and the floor. And you can even do that standing. So if you don't want to be on your knee, just having a staggered stance and punching your hip forward while keeping the front tight targets the hip flexor. Even a simple hinge forward, same requirements from the abdomen, where you don't want to arch back. You want to think about as if you're hinging back and trying even to straighten your knees while keeping your hip forward also stretches the hip flexor. So anything that's going to extend the hip, tilt it. You want to think an anterior tilt, or posterior, because it's from the standpoint of the top of hip moving back, is going to target your hip flexors. We got around 2 minutes left. You're welcome. Lemons don't contain the right ratios of electrolytes. I can't tell you the breakdown exactly, but electrolytes are sodium, potassium, and magnesium. So it might not be enough to hit those requirements. So we have plenty of low back exercises on our app. Please show some examples of stretches to relieve lower back pain and pressure. I wouldn't rely actually on a stretch, but I would start by getting up and moving around as much as you can. Now, again, because I don't know your individual circumstances, it's pretty hard for me to diagnose or suggest something individual. But in general, it's not just a stretch. So a stretch is going to provide temporary relief, meaning if you fold over, or if you have something higher, you fold over, if you twist, if you side bend. But if you go back to being sedentary, sitting, laying down, and not moving at all, unless you have a condition, then your back will always resort to that discomfort. So in addition to using stretches to relieve that acute back pain, in order to prevent it or to lessen it on a whole, stiffness, is to move it. Because your spine likes to move and groove. It doesn't like to be in non-moving state for long periods of time, even upright. And this is something that I say often. People think that perfect posture is going to improve their back pain. No, your spine doesn't like to be upright either, just as much as it doesn't like to be rounded over for a long period of time. And yes, so if it's something from a car accident, then you have to be careful in what measures you use in relieving that stiffness. But if it's stiffness, is moving your spine where it is not painful as much as you can throughout the day. So if that means you have to set a reminder for yourself, like stretch every 30 minutes, stretch every hour, it could be a simple twist, it could be a simple side bend, arch and curl, getting up, moving around, circling your hips, just reminding your spine that it is meant to move and groove and not be still. That's like a whole entire other video that I could get into. But quickly, those will be my recommendations. Coconut water is okay. I don't think it has high levels of potassium, but doesn't have high levels of sodium. And not to say that you have to go crazy high on the sodium, but in terms of the ratios, coconut water unfortunately doesn't provide the level of sodium that would be considered balanced for electrolyte consumption. So you would probably just have to throw in some sea salt. But you also have to remember, with coconut water does come, even though it is naturally occurring sugar, can be higher for what your performance needs are. So coconut water is like great if you are going out for a run or you're doing an endurance event and you're sweating a lot. Not great if you're sitting all day. Not great if you're sitting all day, because we don't have anywhere or any means to burn that energy, right? So coconut water tastes great, but I don't think appropriate for non-active individuals to consume. That's my personal opinion. Not the opinion, just my personal one. Yes, so everyone, thank you so much for joining, and I apologize for signing in late. I'll get it right one of these days. Again, if you would like a free class, make sure you direct message us the word live, LIVE. Our middle splits challenge starts tomorrow, and if you just joined this live, not to fret, we will have it on replay, main feed as a reel, so I'll see you there again. And make sure you tune in again next time, Saturdays 1 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you then, and until I see you again, please take care, everyone, and thank you for taking the time.